G'day everyone, Scarvig here, and we're once again having a look at the game Aloft. They made some changes to their demo, and they also had a little bit of a competition going for the Build Fest that's actually happening on Steam, or at least happened on Steam, depending on when you watch this, and I decided to take part when they reached out and asked if I'd like to have a bit of a go. I like the game Aloft. It's basically a sandbox survival game where you survive on floating islands that are around an eternal hurricane. As you sail around, you find different equipment and technologies which allow you to upgrade your equipment, and ultimately you're fighting some kind of a corruption on some of these islands, which is purely made out of fungi. You end up looking a little bit like mushrooms and other various things like that. And as you clear out those bits of corruption, you will then basically gain access to the resources that were locked on that particular island. So before we have a look at the demo and what it has to offer, we might as well have a look at some of the concept art, as there's quite a lot of concepts that they've actually been throwing out there into their community, and it'll give a bit of an idea of the direction of the game and some of the things that might be coming up in the future. The first up, we'll run quickly through the island biomes, as at the moment there's only a singular type of biome that I've run across in the demo. They have the Black Plains, which seems to be a dark rock with like a wheatgrass or a dead grass kind of a feel to it. The Emerald Isles, which is pretty similar to the what we actually have at the moment in the game, the lush green plains with trees. The Greenlands looks to be far more overgrown with shrubbery and quite a lot more water. The Red Cliffs themselves seems to be quite sparse in terms of the greenery. Potentially there might be some cactuses and very large rock pools. The Rose Towers is quite a different look and feel, where it's obviously very different in terms of the greenery. It's a very different plant life, caves with lots and lots of water that's actually pouring out of them. So it's some kind of maybe an internal structure that goes with those ones. The Wetlands, which is quite obviously a swamp-like island structure, and that's pretty much it for the island art. Next up, we will have a look at the farm animals, as there appears to be some kind of animal husbandry that's going to be introduced, where I assume that you're going to tame these creatures so that you can then farm them, assumedly for their furs and their meats, so that you can get various different cooking recipes, sale recipes, closed recipes, and things like that. At this point in time, they've indicated that there will be something like an alpaca, a goat, pheasant, and sheep that will actually be introduced into the game. They have also introduced some of the concept art for the sails that go on the islands. At the moment, things like the linen sails and the longleaf sails do actually already exist in the game, as well as the helm. However, the cotton sails, the wool sails, and the oars are all things that have not actually been introduced into the demo at this time. Cotton obviously coming from a plant that I haven't actually seen yet, wool from the sheep that is not yet introduced, obviously in the previous concept art for animal husbandry, and the oars themselves look like they are actually an interesting combination, because in the game you can build a windmill, and the windmill will actually be used to automate the power of a number of your crafting buildings, and there's a cogwheel on the oars which I assume would then be driven via the windmills, and so you end up having a automated power function for using oars on the island. Which will be interesting to see how that one plays out, what kind of a speed boost it actually gives you, or potentially there's something else, maybe when you're actually traversing the storms, the oars will actually become far more useful. Something interesting to see how it goes in the future. The last set of concept art that we will look at is around the corruption and the fungi that you see on the islands, the nodes that you actually need to defeat to be able to clear the corruption, as well as the guards, the basic, elite and veteran guards that you encounter along the way, and all of this stuff is actually already in the demo. So as for the demo, you find yourself on the starter island, where you can collect a handful of the first resources such as sticks, leaves and rocks. These will be further refined once you actually learn your first bit of technology. You'll find special stones on every single island where you can learn a bit of technology every time you visit them until all of the technology is learned. The very first thing that you will learn will most likely be the workbench, which you can use to then refine those various resources, such as stones can be refined down into knives, and once you combine various different combinations you can learn other tools such as picks, axes and hammers. With the crafting system, there is actually a little bit of a help system in place where any item that has a little yellow dot on it can be combined with something else to create something that you have not learnt yet before. And so in this way, every time you pick up some kind of new resource, you will get that little bit of a hint as to which items you should combine until you actually learn all of the items that you can make within the game. From here you will learn various other things, new styles of workbenches, new items, and you will eventually take over an island for yourself, building sails and rudders so that you can actually sail around and find the new islands and resources that you need to complete the demo. As we've already discussed, there's only really one type of biome in here, other than the fact that you will find corrupted versions of that as well. And then you will keep crafting and learning and crafting and learning, not that there's a huge amount to it. And then to finish the demo off, once you've actually made your island strong enough, you will head towards the center of the hurricane and see if you can make it through that first layer. Bringing it kind of to the end of the demo. You don't actually have to stop. You can still sail around, visit new islands, and continue your build as such. And this is where we will kind of move into where I was up to with the demo itself. I'll sort of showcase what I was doing with my little bit of a build, the island that I found and settled on, and have my own little bit of fun with it all. And the only other thing that we'll probably touch on before we really get into that, and this is slightly different to the crafting system, it's actually the cooking system. And the cooking system, it was pure discovery. And so as you find new islands, you will come across special resources, so tomatoes, you eventually find some wheat, and that was probably actually the last one I found was the wheat, and various other little bit of veggies and things that you can actually grow. So you can set yourself up a nice little crop plot and get yourself these things growing. And one of them was the flax, which actually allowed you to create linen sails, but then the flax seeds themselves could actually be used in the cooking as well. But cooking is done via trial and discovery. And so you will add various resources to the cooking table and then see what kind of a thing that it produces. And it was only a fairly recent thing as a part of this demo that I found out when I was looking into it. And the recipe book was a fairly new addition to the demo, and a welcome one for everybody. So you didn't need to keep remembering what items you actually put in. You can just click on the recipe and it will add the various ingredients that it requires to actually make that recipe. And I don't think that I've quite exhausted the list, and this is where I actually put in one of my own little hints to them, basically saying that it would be lovely if they expanded the recipe system so that there were intermediary steps. And so you basically had to craft, say, jam. By finding some berries of some sort, you make a jam, and then you use something like the wheat to generate a bread or a damper. And then a further recipe, which is even better than the one before it, you actually combine it. And when I say better than before, it's probably a good time to introduce what it is that the foods actually do for you. And this is kind of similar to games like Valheim and Icarus, who followed on from Valheim, and there's a few others I'm sure that did it prior to this. But when you eat the food will have a certain value which will give you health or stamina or various other things like that. And so cooking better foods will allow the buffs that you get to your stats, so more stamina and more health, which allows you to fight for longer, but it will you basically get more health or more stamina, or you get more duration depending on how good the food that you have. And so you can see how having an expanded repertoire of foods might end up having quite nice little neat buffs that you could get for yourself. And it could even be that they actually incorporate other skills where you might have specific ones for holding your breath underwater, flight speed, or other things like that. Or maybe there might even be some skill related ones which will improve your farming, etc, etc. And it'll be interesting to see if they actually go down that route, because at this stage, obviously pre-alpha demo, there is it's got a wonderful system, it's a good base, and they have a lot of things that they could actually choose to implement. And whether or not they go down those routes, I guess it will all come down to some community input and what they're planning to do with it in the first place. Alright, well I think that will bring us to the end of my showcase of the demo. I will then have a look, I guess, at the island that I found and the things that I've done with it. Certainly the things that I have done almost pale in comparison to some of the pictures that I've actually seen. And really, I was attempting to find a very flat island so that I could actually build the things that I wanted to build. We might as well have a look at all of that now. All the pictures that I've been seeing other people do, they made use of the terrain and made these fantastic builds where it was winding through the various different crevices, and it was quite wonderful to see. Whereas I actually was looking for a nice big flat island which had a water source, because water is obviously very useful for crops and things like that. And so I just basically went with a fairly simple castle design, and there's my little pond that's basically sitting at the front. And although it looks a little bit weird, the shape at the top here is actually very reminiscent of the trawlers that you actually see on the ocean, and so I kind of went with that. And really I need more decorative items where I can actually put on flags and other bits and pieces, and maybe even like wall hangings, things like, at the moment the only kind of decorations that I had were the little handrails on the castle and the windows themselves. but I would love a lot more. And when I shared the screenshot of this, basically they were the few people that saw it were basically thinking Lord of the Rings and lighting the fires, basically, because I can actually light these fires if I can remember how to slow down. We'll land on top, boom, and so yeah, we can light these fires. And so you end up having, I guess it's the Fires of Gondor. And yeah, I was quite happy with that. And I got a few screenshots, maybe I'll put a few up where I had the lighting done quite well. I have a few sails across the back here. I have actually seen people stacking the sails one on top of each other, and those sails end up looking quite nice when you have multiple square sails sitting on top of each other. And then here we have the windmills, which are actually controlling the automation, which when we talked about the oars later on, these windmills turn the ropes, and these ropes via little extensions. And this is my compost that's being run via the system. But in here I have various workbenches, things like a millstone, which you can understand that you'd like to have the millstone automated, where you just pop in whatever seeds you want and it grinds out what you need. And so there's a loom and various other workbenches that I have available here, as well as obviously the fire. And while the fireplace looks really nice, I haven't actually found any extra spots, whereas it's basically the bonfires, you have a lot of extra cooking spots. And in here I actually have some flatbread that I cooked earlier. But while we're in here, we might as well have a look at what I did on the inside. I kind of went with a chessboard look and feel for the lower floor. I would like it if in the future they got rid of the grass that pokes through the items. So if you were to place down the flooring, and these are actually foundation pieces, it would actually remove the grass so that you didn't have it poking up through the bottom. So you can actually see with the water source that I have here, the reeds are basically growing through everything, and it looks a little bit odd. It took me a long time to sort out this spiral staircase, because a single spiral doesn't end nicely, and so you end up with a little bit of a jagged edge getting it through, but I did actually get it through. And I still have yet to outfit my bedroom. As I said, there's actually a big lack of cosmetic items in the game, and so I would love a lot more cosmetic stuff here, so I could actually outfit this with some kind of grand design of not just beds, but maybe even thrones and rugs and lights and all the rest of that sort of stuff, and that would be really cool. Then we get up to the top. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the other roof pieces, because at the moment there's wood, there's stone, and there's these leaf grassy roof pieces, whereas I know that the game kind of indicates that there'll be marble and things like that, so some more material types will be really nice. And then obviously, as I said, there's the handrail that I have available for actually building around the outside. And in terms of the crop plot, I just went with a big massive garden. And so here I could actually harvest some of this stuff at the moment. My flax is actually growing quite nicely here. Flax being the item that allows you to get to the second tier of sales. So once I found that item and I unlocked all the farming, I basically went to town on growing the stuff. This is my wheat crop, I think, growing here. Got some nice tomatoes, pumpkins, carrots, and some of the blueberries. And you know, as you clear these things out, some of them are persistent. Like this is actually, I think might be the pumpkin. No, it's not pumpkin, it's something else. Oh, that's the watermelon. And so things like the pumpkin here, you pick it, but you don't lose your plant. It's the same with the berries. You pick your berries, but they actually stay there. Other than something over here. So if I was to actually harvest the flax, it will actually remove it. And so I now need to plant that once again. And so a few crops are like that. I don't have any of the truly harvested. Like there's some hand harvested ones, so you can get like the carrots and things like that. When you harvest them, you actually harvest them just by picking them out of the ground. But they're gone and you need to place them again. But this is my base. As I said, this was actually part of a Build Fest competition. It's a shame that I didn't really have a lot of time to invest in this, and I end up spending more than a week usually editing my videos these days. So you're watching this probably towards the end of the Build Fest, unfortunately. But certainly give it a look. The game has a free demo that anyone can pretty much jump in and download. They have a Discord where you can actually join in the conversation with the community to see where they're at with everything and share on the early look at the concept art and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I really like Aloft. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and yeah, let me know in the comments what you think of all of this kind of stuff. And I will continue to look at some of the new games coming up. I've actually found a whole bunch of new games coming up with demos and things like that, so I'm basically going to give a lot of them a try. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening in, and I'll catch you in the next one.